Hi, I'm Dave Schatz with DHS Equipment. We can be found online at dhsequipmentparts.com. Today I'm going to go over the lower percussion system in the Wacker jumping jack. We're going to go over disassembly, inspection, and reassembly of the springs, and we're going to check for wear on the springs. We're going to inspect the stoppers, and we're going to go through that procedure now. Okay? The first thing is, if you don't know how we've got to this point so far, we've got a Wacker Bellows replacement video. If you watch that video, it'll give you step by step on how we got to this point right now. Okay, having gotten to this point now, the next thing we're going to do to get the springs out of the spring box is to flip this over. You're going to start by removing your shoe, and when you remove that shoe, you're going to be left with this spring plate right here. There are several ways to get this spring plate off of the bottom here. You've got to remember this is spring loaded. If you don't have this compressed and you take that last screw out, there's a ton of pressure in there. So you've got to follow these couple of procedures. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. The first way is very inexpensive, a little time consuming, but very inexpensive, just by getting some M8 by 1.25 threaded rod. We'll remove 2 screws, we'll put the threaded rods in here, we'll run the nuts all the way down, we'll remove all the screws, and then we'll slowly start taking the pressure off the nuts, left side, right side, and that plate will just slowly start to come up. The other method is by using a hydraulic press. All you have to do is situate this in the press, get your ram all the way down on the plate, remove your screws, slowly remove the pressure from your press, and the spring box lid will start to rise, getting some of the pressure off the springs. The main method I like to use, it's easier. The tool itself is a little pricey. It's about $300, but we also rent this tool for about $25. You just order it online, return it within a certain time frame, and you get all your money back with the exception of the $25. This is called a spring box tool, and what it does is we'll remove 3 screws, we'll set those 3 screws in there, we'll remove all the screws, and then we'll use the impact wrench, and we'll just release the pressure with this tool. It's a great little tool. That is part number 81423. It's a very helpful tool, and this is how we'll do it. Okay, so we remove the 3 screws. We line the 3 screws up with the tool, nice and snug. Get it centered. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and remove the other screws now. Again, once we start to release this just a little bit, if you don't see the plate popping up, grab your little ball peen hammer or a little chisel or something and knock around the edges just to loosen it up and make sure it gets unstuck. Now we're just ready to hit it with the impact. It really is the fastest way. And we'll go ahead and release these screws. Okay. Set this to the side. Set this to the side. Okay. Go ahead and remove our first set of springs. Now, we just put this together the other day. In most cases, your stopper is not going to be in perfect condition. Okay, when we took this apart, this is what came out. So if you open this up and you realize that you don't have one of these bushings, this is what you're going to have inside of here. A lot of times it's these broken bushings and these parts and pieces getting stuck and wedged between the springs. This is going to give you erratic jumping, just like a cracked or a broken or a worn spring will. So don't be surprised if this is what you get. The good thing about it is if this is what you get, the rest of this comes apart very easily. Otherwise, you need to have some persuasive actions, mallets and whatnot. Okay, the next thing we've got to do, if your stopper is still in good condition, there's an impact bushing tool. This impact bushing tool helps remove this final stopper. That is part number 116816, and it's a very helpful tool. Okay, this is what it looks like. This is going to fit over the stopper. It's go over the stopper. It's going to open up at the very end and grab it at the bottom. Then we drop this little ring down. That'll prevent these little sides from opening up. And then we'll go ahead and set this on there, and we'll just rotate this clockwise. This will press it down, and this will wind up pulling the stopper back up. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and separate this over the stopper. You got a good bite on it. The ring already dropped down, so these don't spread apart. And we're going to go ahead and put this clockwise. Okay. This, and it pulls the stopper right out. If you don't use this method and your stopper doesn't look like this, you're going to have to chisel it off. Get in there with a screwdriver or something, just kind of get in there and break it apart, because you're not going to be able to pull it out. The end of this piston rod is tapered, and it just kind of presses in there and locks in. So if you don't pull it out, you're going to have to break it out. To me, if you break it out, it's not a big deal, because just like any other thing, once you're inside of one of these machines, it's best to replace these inexpensive stoppers anyway. These are about $17 or so. If you're going to go in here and replace springs and do all kind of internal work, put a new stopper in for 17 bucks. You don't want to have a problem with this, you know, months later. Okay, so we've got the stopper out. The next thing we have to do, we're going to have to remove that nut in order to get to the plate. So that's what we're going to do next. You're going to have a screwdriver or something push through here, otherwise, because that nut is attached to that rod. So by putting this over here, once we put some force onto that nut, this won't rotate. The nut is off. We're left with that little plate. Sometimes you just gotta wiggle it out. If it doesn't just wiggle out, you can take those threaded rods, put them into the holes, put a little pressure on the sides, and just kind of walk it out of that cylinder. Otherwise, if you try to dump it over, once it gets a little angle, it's just going to get itself wedged. Okay, so those same threaded rods, you could pull that right out. Next comes the second set of springs. After the second set of springs, there's another bushing in here. This other bushing, this is where if it looks like this, that piston rod will just slide right out. But this is a new bushing that we put on the other day, so it's nice and firm. It's a little trickier to get out. Sometimes you get lucky, you'll be able to just pull this out. Today we got lucky. And this will be that other bushing coming out right here. Okay, now that we've got the springs out, we'll set the cylinder box over to the side, and we will go ahead and look at the springs. The various models have different specifications on the springs and spring lengths. This particular one should be about 8 9/16. Wacker allows for 3/16 difference between spring height. More importantly is not so much the spring height of each one, but the difference between one and the other. Best way to measure the spring height, take the spring, make a mark on each side. Take your measurement, record your measurement. Take your next spring, do the same thing, make a new line for that one, record your measurement again. They should be equal. Again, as important as the measurement is that Wacker gives you, it's as more important that they're equal with each other. They're opposing springs or opposing forces on this plate. So spring tension and spring length, spring distance has to be equal from one to the other. If one is a little bit longer than the other, you're going to have erratic jumping. So this works on the spring pressure from the plate back. This works on spring pressure from the plate back this way. So if one's a little stronger, it's never going to have that perfect little jump. So it's very critical that these are the same. If there's any damage on one spring, you see a little crack or one is a little bit worn, you've got to replace these as a set. Right there. That's pretty much it on inspecting the springs. Okay, once we've established that the springs are either going to get replaced because they're out of spec, or we've determined that they're within spec and we're going to reuse them, now we're going to reassemble this lower unit. We're going to start by installing the piston. Once this piston is on, we can put our first set of springs, and we're going to put our bushing. Tap that first bushing in. Ready to put our little plate in. Sometimes it gets a little funny angle, you may have to just straighten it out a little bit. Tap that down a little. Okay. Go ahead and put the second set of springs in, just to force, because right now we're still trying to force that bushing over the piston. So we're going to hit this down just to force it down a little bit. Okay. What that did was force that plate on top of the bushing and force that bushing down further on the piston. And now there's enough thread showing on the piston, we can go ahead and get our nut started. Okay. This nut gets torqued down, and just like everything else, every model's got its own specification. So depending on which model you're working on, just give us a call, shoot us an email, we'll get you over the correct specs. So we're going to go ahead and torque this down to whatever spec it's supposed to be. Okay, once that's torqued down, again, you're going to use this so you could, so it doesn't rotate on you. Once that's torqued down, we're ready to put on the other stopper. Okay, now we're ready for our other stopper. Now this other stopper, if you saw the shape of the end of the piston, it's got a taper, and it's to fit right into this hole. And it's also got a little lip under it, so that once it's forced down, it doesn't come up, which is why we needed that tool in the first place. So what we need to do is give it a nice bap on the top to force it over the head. Sometimes just a little tap with the mallet will do. Okay, so once that pops in and gets seated, we're good to go. Put our remaining springs on. Okay, put our gasket on. Put our plate back on. And we will set up this spring box tool again. 3 holes. Even. Okay.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy, the chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Okay, once we get close enough, we can start putting some screws in. And then we could draw it down the rest of the way with the screws. Again, depending on your model, that'll depend on the torque specs that we use. And remember, when you're putting these bolts in, use a medium strength blue Loctite. Okay, you'll be torquing these down, you're not just going to use a ratchet, but once these are torqued down, so once you put your shoe back on, you're ready to put this back onto the machine, put your bellows on. Again, look at our bellows video. Our bellows video will show you how to reassemble this, how to add the oil, check the oil, and go from there. So again, this is the lower percussion system of the Wacker jumping jack. If you've got some kind of erratic jumping, anything that's out of the ordinary, some weird strange noises, check in here. You've got broken bushings or broken springs, worn springs, something along those lines. Remember, this bottom end is spring loaded. Use one of the 3 methods that we went over to remove that plate. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.